Welcome back to the Innovative Agency, everybody. Sharon Toerek here with you again. And I am looking forward to the opportunity to have today's conversation about sort of an angle on growth that I think is super important for all of us to keep in mind. But as I was saying to today's guest, who I'm going to introduce in a second, I think right now, given the turbulence in the agency landscape, and it always feels like something's making it turbulent, but it feels a little extra, I'm sure, to all of you right now. Economics, politics, technology, it's all kind of converging to make things a little bit confusing, a little bit fast moving. And so mindset's important. And so I'm looking forward to digging into that today with Jesse Gilmore, who is the founder of Niche and Control, a consultancy and advisory with a super awesome name. Jesse, I love niches and I love control, as I told you before I hit record. So welcome. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on, Sharon. I'm excited for the
My,
conversation.
it's my pleasure. So I want to start, and this is a little bit of an unusual turn for me in terms of how I usually kick an episode off, but I
Hmm.
actually want to start by reading something really quickly, um, which is going to be new to all of you listening, but won't be new to you, Jesse. There was a point a few businesses ago where I genuinely thought I just might not be cut out for this. The revenue was there, clients were happy, but I was exhausted, waking up tired, carrying the business in my head every second of the day, always waiting for one thing to finally make it easier. That one hire, that one new offer, that one slow season where I would finally get ahead. But it never came. Every solution I tried just made things heavier because the truth was I wasn't fixing the real problem. Everything still ran through me. Every fire, every decision, every late night email, and eventually the weight cracked something open. So I stepped away. I spent 5 years inside companies that didn't run on duct tape and personal willpower, and I saw what actually looks like to lead and not just survive. That really kind of hit me between the eyes. I think it would hit most entrepreneurs between the eyes. But I guess my first question for you is, what were the first things you noticed or saw when you took that opportunity to step away that sort of informed your decision to do what you do now for agencies?
Mm. Yeah, so a little bit of background on that post. In my first businesses, I didn't really understand systems or duplication or being able to train somebody to do the work that you do better or at least at the equal quality. And so what happened was is that the businesses on the outside looked very successful. They were gaining popularity. There was a lot of people talking about it. And on the inside, what was happening was I kept on working harder. So every new client meant more hours, and it just kept on getting to a place where I was working 60, 80-hour weeks for years. And I'm a natural workaholic, and I've had to I'm a recovering one now,
Mhm.
and I had to get to a place where I started realizing that the main reason why I created businesses in the first place was to create freedom. But yet, what I was creating somehow was just not giving me what I actually went after. And so I think for anybody that might have resonated with that post, you might be working additional hours, working into the weekends, sacrificing family or friend time, or like all your hobbies are gone or whatever else. And it starts to get to a place where it's unsustainable.
Mhm.
And the understanding that and the challenge that happens when you dissolve three businesses on your entrepreneurial journey, and each one of them for the same issue, you start to realize that something's wrong. Like you got to do something different. And
Mhm.
so it wasn't until I started working in a $4 billion global corporation, very specifically to remove what's called single points of failure within the business, that I started realizing in corporate I was learning everything that I wish I would have known in my previous businesses. And
Mhm.
so Niche and Control was founded during a time where the business unit got acquired for $180 million based
Mhm.
around the systems that we had developed. And then I was like, oh my gosh, now I got to find more people like me, but now I need to start working with it. And it wasn't until I worked with a digital marketing agency owner, Warren, I took his agency from 15,000 to 100,000 in 9 months. that I started understanding, holy cow, like I think there's something there with it. But it gives a little bit of background, Sharon.
Yeah, I think that's very helpful. I have so many questions. I guess the first of which is, what were some of the one thing you said you wrote in that passage that I read that really resonated with me was that adding more people wasn't fixing the problem.
Mm,
Because I think one thing that agency owners and leaders strive for when they strive to turn the business into more of a business versus a consultancy or a practice or whatever you might call it.
mhm,
Um, you think that you know at an intellectual level that systems are important, but what you really think you need is more bodies to do more things so that in
mhm,
your perception you don't have to do them. Um,
mhm,
so guess I'm wondering when you decided to jump into a big, big, big organization and
mhm,
sort of started learning, what were some of the first things you noticed about scale and
mhm,
about what entrepreneurial agency leaders are doing to shoot themselves in the foot, if you will, in
mhm,
terms of scaling and also getting their own personal freedom back?
totally. So it's two sides of the same coin. So I'll talk about one half, which is the corporate side, and then I'll talk about the agencies after.
Mhm.
So on the corporate side, one of the things that I noticed was that they were able to change the people doing the work, and the customer didn't get impacted. So the systems we were building made it to where they could literally move people. So Sharon, now you're going to do this thing. You're just going to follow this and you're going to execute it. And then you have this QA person that checks it, right? And I
Mhm.
was like, holy cow, that's kind of cool. You know? And I was like,
Yeah.
all right, well, let's start building that out. And on the corporate side, single points of failure. So anybody that doesn't know that, I had a whole episode with Drew McKellen, very specifically on this one thing called single points of failure. But single
Yeah.
points of failure is basically very simply in the business, if a single person could be you as a founder, which usually is, could be an employee, could be a contractor, could be a vendor, that is kind of crucial to a certain service or a certain task or process, that if that person is gone, then the customer gets impacted because there's some issue there, you can't actually deliver on it.
Mhm.
So when you think about removing single points of failure in a business, it's kind of like a long-term growth goal, right? You want to be able to build enough systems for you to do it. And a lot of people rush towards the hiring people, and sometimes with systems and sometimes with automation, especially with AI now, is you want to start with the systems and the processes first. And the reason being is that you actually want to try to eliminate the need for hiring in the first place. Because if you
Mhm.
can do it through systems and processes and just being better at doing the thing,
Mhm.
then it not only saves you on profit margins, it also saves you from a really awkward conversation with a hire. When you hire them, you build systems, and then all of a sudden you remove the need for that person,
Yeah.
right? And so we have a very specific method that's called leverage for growth, which we could get into later, where it literally goes in the order by which to grow sustainably.
Mhm.
And I think that when you're working the 68-hour weeks, you might have to hire somebody just to get out of that, like that piece, and then you go back into systems and start working on it.
Mhm.
But if you're not working the 68-hour weeks and you think you need to hire, need to hire when it hurts, right? And then hire slow and fire fast. It's like two kind of like themes that one of my corporate mentors always like pushed into me.
Right.
But
Yeah. Yeah, we've
uh,
all heard it for years. It's easy to understand, hard to execute.
mhm,
Yeah.
mhm, yeah.
You know, and on that point, I think something that, well, actually any professional service business struggles with, but I know agencies in fact struggle with is the timing of when you need to expand capacity to meet demand and to not get too over your skis and overextended expense and commitment wise before you know you're going to have the demand for it, but also not to wait too long so that service quality, client relationships, and employee morale are not all suffering. So, what what wisdom do you have to share for agency leaders listening to this about how to deal with that whole dynamic?
Yeah. So I would do it in an order. So when we think about building up capacity, you should always be focused around capacity development as an ongoing thing. It's not like one time you do it and you built capacity and then now you're at it. There is constant tools and ways to be able to build capacity right from the get-go. Now, if you are a founder and you're listening to this and you're going, I'm working the 60-hour week, so I'm trying to figure out how to do it. The easiest way to start the process is just get really clear on where your time is going right now. Just do a time log for 7 days, log it for every half an hour. And from there, both personal and professional, you'll start to understand patterns. Your main goal as a founder is to free up 8 to 10 hours per week for you to work on the business. And when you start to understand that just maybe the order by which you're doing things can free up more time. And we have a whole model that's like eliminate, automate, delegate, and time block. So you eliminate certain things that you're doing that you don't have to do. You automate what you can. You delegate what is like low risk or low value tasks. And then whatever else is left, you do what's called time blocking. And time blocking is really geared towards like similar kind of like states of mind, like technical blocks or strategic blocks, right? It allow you to kind of tackle tasks that are very similar where you're not task switching, which creates a lot of fatigue and issues and
Right.
inefficiencies and so forth. That's on the founder side. Now, the C-suite people that are listening to this are like, "Hey, I'm not a founder, but I'm the COO or whatever."
Mhm.
You want to do the same exact thing where you're starting to come up with maybe working on the business time or strategic time, where you're systematically starting to go through what am I doing right now that somebody underneath me can actually do, right? And the
Right.
time use is like the single input. And then from there, you start to understand what systems need to be built and so forth. And there's a method by which you build systems. But if you're kind of reactive and you're listening to this and you're like, I want to free up time, just go through a time log, then eliminate, automate, delegate, time block. That's like the easiest way to start.
Got it. And do you have a point of view on how to decide if you own or are leading an agency when it truly is a people capacity thing? And this may be an
Mhm.
unfair question now because AI is changing the game so quickly in terms
Mhm.
of behind the curtain workflow and operations and things like that for agencies. But how do you know whether if you can know, how do you know whether it's truly a system improvement thing that can get you where you need to be, or whether whether you actually do need more humans to help you get to
Mhm.
the next level as an agency?
Yeah, that's a good question. So is it a capacity issue or is it where you actually need to hire somebody? I
Hmm.
think you get to a certain time when if everything is in your head right now, it is definitely a systems issue. So like,
Yeah,
if you're like
fair enough.
listening to this and you're like, oh, you're trying to figure it out. If it's not documented, that's like the first step. And you should never rush to AI if you do not have your processes documented. And I talk about I could probably go on a whole rant about effectiveness before speed,
Hmm.
but when you're trying to figure out like is it a capacity, I would start with the capacity. So like if you're listening to this and you're trying to figure it out, I would start with the capacity basis and try to increase capacity. If you get
Hmm.
to a certain place where it just does not make any sense to try to like get 2% more capacity and it really is just a people focus, then
Hmm.
hire the person, have that person start building systems. Like someone needs to come in, and in the first 90 days, you have, I mean, based around US, and there's a lot of other countries that are like this, but within the first 90 days, you can kind of like determine if this is the right person. And one of the greatest things you can do in the first 30 days is have that person do informational interviews with everybody that's around that role. So they're gathering information about stakeholders and SOPs and so forth, and gives them an opportunity to start building improvements. Now, every single hire should actually be set up for success. And if they're not, if you don't have things documented right now, and then you hire somebody, they are not set up for success. Like,
Right.
so there's an order by which to do it. But I would, just in answer to your question, I would start with capacity development first and just try that as much as you possibly can before you're actually going towards hiring. Because you want to hire and you want to keep the person because dependable expertise is actually what you're going after.
Right. Well, and to your point earlier, the stop starting of hiring someone who then doesn't succeed because you haven't onboarded them in a fair and sufficient manner. It's costing you time, it's costing you money, and you're still working 60, 70, 80 hours a week, right? So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
definitely take your point there. Um, So I want to pull a thread of what you just said there as we sort of take a turn to talking about system development. Because we
Mhm.
talked about people a little bit, but you mentioned, bringing that individual in as a system developer, a system creator. In your experience, do you feel like you can centralize system development within an agency? Can somebody develop all the systems associated with account management and the creative process and biz dev? Or do they have to be knowledgeable in all of those areas to build good systems to help?
That's a good question. So this reminds me of my client Susan. She was a full service creative agency owner, and she had hired so many agency gurus that had tried to teach her things about scale, and nothing seemed to work. And she wrote the forward in my book where she had talked about coming to me and going, "I only have." I got 6 more months. If I can't turn this thing around, I'm actually going to shut it down. So, very similar to what my previous businesses were. And she's
Mhm.
like, I've tried like everything. I'm just exhausted. Right. And I took a look at the business model and I was like, okay, you're going to need to implement what's called scalable customization. So everybody in the agency world talks about either a productized agency or a completely reinventing the wheel every single time for creative,
Yeah,
creative benefit.
It's Drew's old analogy of the Wonder Bread factory versus the artisanal bakery. Drew McClellan
Yeah.
talks about this all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. And what I said to her, I was like, there's basically 80% of your business is going to be actually the same for every client. So if you really look at every single client that you're working with, the onboarding is relatively similar. 80% is probably the same, regardless of actually the services, which might be more custom to the client. The
Mhm.
actual onboarding process or the SEO process or the print collateral process, or whatever it is the same. When you think about systems, you want to start with the stuff that's the same.
Okay.
And you just start building that and you build as much streamlined processes as humanly possible. All the automations like that, everything is like that. And then what that does is it allows you to focus on the 20% that's different for every client. And the client gets both speed and that customization. So when we think about systems, we want to look at it from a lens of the 80-20, and we want to look at it from a lens of this is what we start with first, all the commonalities between clients. And then that gives us actually the time and the energy to be more creative with those types of clients. And just to close the loop on Susan. So in 6 months, she doubled her revenue. So she got really close to about 1 million or so. And then within 18 months of starting, she got acquired. And she talks about, and this is maybe a segment into mindset, because she said everything that really changed for me is just how I looked at my business, how I looked at everything, how what the offer was, and how I interacted with the team. Once I started looking at it differently, everything changed. And she's like, I am unbelievably happy, which is a really cool thing. Like I get
Yeah,
kind of like teary
definitely.
up because of it, because it was one
That's
of
what
the
you want to
most
hear. Yeah.
impactful things.
Yeah. One of the components that you mentioned of going through this journey of scaling while sort of hedging away from owner burnout is this idea of creating this minimally viable offer,
Mhm.
minimally viable product or service, however you want. I mean, it's not a new term, but
Mhm.
it's sort of integral to how you think about agencies walk through this
Mhm.
process. And
Mhm.
so I love it, obviously, because of the IP nerd in me. And anybody who's listened to, more than a few episodes of this show knows that that is a soapbox for me. And I also think we're really in a renaissance opportunity right now for agencies to finally take their IP and turn it into replicable revenue streams that are separate and apart from their fee for service work. So, it's a joy for me to be able to ask you this question, but
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that, the process of trying to determine what your minimally viable offer could be.
Mhm.
What do you need to look at to figure out how to design it? What are some tips or pieces of advice you have for agency owners who love the idea, but they don't really know like how to build it or how to
Mhm.
create it?
Mhm. Yeah. So let's take that full service agency example. Okay. And Susan was another one that we did the core services, but I won't keep on using her. For full service, you might have like 10 different types of services that you're offering. When we start to look at the services, I guarantee that there are certain services you're actually not competent in. Like it's not your zone of genius. It's not the thing that gets you excited about working with clients on. When someone signs on for SEO, but you're not really focused around SEO, and then it
Mhm.
feels like a burden, right? When we think about a minimum viable solution, what it really is, at least in my eyes, is that it's the least amount of effort on my end to get you the greatest results. And when we think about an agency, it's the least amount of effort on the agency side to get the greatest results for a certain type of client.
Right.
Now, part of the reason and why we are very stringent about working with very specifically staged agencies, those agencies that are at a certain stage, is because you have to have at least 5 paying clients for a certain service or have gone through a proof of concept stage, so that way, what we can do is we can start looking at all the different services you offer, all the different clients, and then start to look for what's called a fractal pattern, where there's a higher profit, there's least amount of effort, there's huge value. Like and based around what you do for certain clients, you can kind of look for certain signs that are telling you, hey, this work with Susan. So creative agencies are one of my favorite agencies to work with because of the
Yeah.
same scenario that we talked about with Susan.
Yeah.
And with that, there might be a single service or a collection of services or services in a certain order that are basically giving that minimum viable solution, something that you're very confident in delivering. I think all full service agencies, and granted, this is probably like polarizing, but all full service agencies are really generalists and they need to go into specialists.
Mhm.
And especially now with like AI and whatever, there's like a separation between the execution based agencies and the strategic ones.
Right.
And all of my clients, I'm trying to push up market. Just
Yeah.
keep going up market, keep going up market.
100% agree with you. And
Yeah.
as we're sitting here having this conversation, it's late August, 2025, and actually, Ad Age, there is a lead article today, in Ad Age about agencies actually being expected to go in that direction by their clients.
Mm-hmm.
And the move away from actually engaging agencies for the doing and the producing, from that to the strategizing and you know what I mean, and the
Mm-hmm.
building, the creating. So
Mm-hmm.
I agree 100%. And again,
Mm-hmm.
totally in alignment with my soapbox.
It's not because I listened to 3 of your episodes right before this, but yeah, I'm just kidding.
No, no, I didn't brainwash you. And you know, I occasionally will change a heart or a mind, but the the truth is we're at from my perspective, as someone who serves this industry, we're at a juncture where I agree with you. Agencies, they have to make this choice, and either choice is valid, but it's going to affect your timeline, right? Most likely. If you kind of want to ride out, and there are some, agencies where where leadership maybe they've been at it a while and maybe they're just not, ready for the next evolution or interested in the next evolution of the way the business models will work for agencies. But if you're going to stay in it and you're in it for the long haul, I 100% agree with you that you have to own a narrow slice, of the market. And it sounds like we're in agreement that scaling becomes much easier when you make that choice.
And the reason, let's just piggyback on that for a second, because I do monthly workshops and I teach a lot about this very specific topic. And depending on when this actually gets released, we're going to actually take that whole minimum viable offer and make it into a course that people can go through individually. But the when we think about the offer and the positioning and the whole like specialist kind of role, ultimately you're going to want to be paid more and lead towards what's called value-based pricing. So that's another thing that is something I haven't touched on with the minimum viable solution, because ultimately it should never be based around the amount of hours that you put towards something, right?
Right.
And the hourly models just need to die
Yeah.
because it's more based around
100%.
value.
Yeah. And it is a very hard legacy to kill. And
Mm-hmm.
that's true in other professional service firms too. But I actually think that agencies are doing a slightly better job than some of the other professional service industries are in terms of making this transition, but it's an old habit that dies really hard overall. And again, I think we're being pushed in a direction where it's not going to be a choice, right? And so know how to do it smartly, know how to do it well, and also achieve sort of this side goal of not burning yourself out so you don't even want the business that you have anymore, you know?
Hmm. Hmm.
Which kind of gets us back to mindset.
Yeah, I know. And before we get into the mindset, so I do want to come back to it, but I think that to empower everybody that's listening to us, so anytime we talk about AI and people are like, ah, and then they have to like spend, I just freed up 20 hours, but now I'm spending all the time with ChatGPT. Like, okay.
Yeah,
What we want to do, and it's going to lead back towards mindset and different ways of looking at it, but you need to focus on the things you can control.
right.
You
So
can,
true.
yeah, you can't control AI and whatever. What can you control? Well, you can control if you're using AI to make sure it's still effective, right? And build it back into some of the basics. I think a lot of people made things way too complex, and AI is just a tool. And everybody's marketing message about it taking everybody's job is actually just wrong.
Mhm.
There's ultimately going to be people that use AI in certain ways, but it doesn't necessarily mean that AI is the solution. What is the solution is your processes, is the documentation, everything that we're talking about. Nothing in the leverage for growth method has changed based around AI. Like
Mhm.
it's the innate piece that creates your ability to scale, to sell the business and work in it when you want to. The pathway is exactly the same, which is what is in my book and everything else. And it
Yeah,
comes down to the mindset and the remembering of what your vision was in the first place of what you're trying to accomplish, you know?
yeah, I agree. I wonder, and I'd love to know how your perspective has shifted or how you think it might shift, maybe is a better question, over the next year to two as we're seeing the industry transition so much. What do you think you're going to be saying 12 or 18 or 24 months from now to your clients about running their agencies that maybe you haven't traditionally said or had to say?
Yeah. So, I mean, we are using AI to build SOPs, or we have like SOP creator and stuff like that. So there's different things that we're actually using AI in. But if I think about 1 or 2 years from now, what would be what I'm teaching them? I think it would have more to do with how this foundational work that we do with process documentation, workflows, and so forth. Instead of training people, you're training AI agents.
Hmm.
But with the AI agents, there's limitations within all of this. And the majority of people have to enjoy their job. And so whenever you hire somebody to like talk to AI agents, they're not like maybe they
Yeah.
don't like doing that, and you're still going to want a culture of the group. And so there's kind of like this ebb and flow. But I think
Mhm.
that what's most important is when you build in 2 years or now or whenever, you build feedback cycles within your processes, and you make sure that you're getting feedback that you're heading in the right direction, whether it's AI, whether it's processes or so forth. I don't
Mhm.
think, and because business has been around for a really long time, there are some things that just literally don't change. Processes, effectiveness, client satisfaction. Like there's very specific things. And I don't,
Mhm.
I think that regardless of what marketing messages are out there that AIs are going to talk to AI in order for the buying decisions to be made, I don't think that's ever going to happen. And I don't think that the market is actually going to allow complete autonomy within AI. I think that people might go that route and focus on
Mhm.
results right now, and then they're going to come back to needing control.
Well, it's funny because even though we humans cannot always tell the difference 100% of the time between human and AI created content, for example, we still don't trust AI as much as we trust another human.
Hmm.
So I think that'll play a part too in how much we're willing to use it or turn over aspects of our business or our lives in general to it. Um,
Hmm.
and I think a healthy amount of skepticism and also, using your own human intelligence to ask a lot of questions is always going to be relevant.
Hmm.
And that's what agencies are great at asking big
Yeah.
questions, helping their clients ask big questions about their businesses, and then developing creative ways to either solve their problems or take advantage of opportunities. And I don't
Mhm.
think that mission's not going to change.
Mhm.
Um, and whatever way you can scale to do that better and more profitably is, I think, a goal that all of us share, right? For any
Mhm.
agency owner. And so this has been such a fascinating and refreshing conversation, Jesse. I really appreciate it. And I would love it if you would tell agency owners listening where they can find out more about niche and control and how they can get in touch with you to learn about what you do.
Yeah, thank you, Sharon. So anybody that's a marketing agency owner that wants to learn more about niche and control, you can just go to our website, nicheandcontrol.com. Depending on when this episode is released, we're going to start having asynchronous courses based around something very similar to what we talked about today, minimum viable solutions and core offers and so forth for the agency. And then we've been running monthly or quarterly workshops. And they're for free. So if someone gets a lot of value from what is leverage for growth method or how does that apply to my agency, events.nicheandcontrol.com is where that is. And then I'm most active on LinkedIn. So you can find me at Jesse P. Gilmore
Awesome.
on LinkedIn.
Awesome. It's been a great conversation. I really appreciate you spending time and lending perspective today. Jesse Gilmore from Niche and Control. Thank you so much. And thank you to the rest of you for joining us today. I hope you got as much out of the conversation as I did. And until we meet again, everybody stay well. Take care.